Well, hey there, folks. How you doing today? Hope you're having an awesome day. Well, today we're going to have a look at a knife that's just a classic piece of American cutlery and probably a classic piece of Americana. It's a knife that is just synonymous with the brand, just to the point that the knife and the brand, the name just gets used interchangeably. That is the Kabar U.S. Marine Corps 1217 Fighting Utility Knife. Comes in this good-looking box here with kind of a wood grain look to it. And there's your product information. So this is the Ka-Bar U.S. Marine Corps 1217 Fighting and Utility Knife. Got a nice product information insert. Gives you some care and instructions as far as sharpening and storage. And they indicate there, very importantly, never store your knife in the sheath. And if you have a high carbon blade, then always kind of oil it before you put it away. And some historical information on the brand and the knife. If you'd like to pause there and peruse that. Comes with a very nice looking sheath, stamped with your Kabar and your U.S. Marine Corps and your globe and your eagle. We'll look at that in a few minutes. And then here is your knife with that cardboard sleeve that they suggest you store it in. And there it is. The Kabar U.S. Marine Corps Fighting and Utility Knife. Tang stamped with USMC for U.S. Marine Corps. Kabar, manufactured in Olean, New York. So that's a knife that you just recognize when you look at it. And when I saw one on sale, I just had to grab it. So this knife was designed by Union Cutlery at an open request from the U.S. military looking for a fighting and utility knife. Now, there were other brands that provided models that were produced and used, and we'll sneak a little bit of that up here just so you can have a look-see. Case made some, other companies made them, but the Kabar fighting utility knife is probably the one that's most recognizable and most known. So this knife was produced from 1942 to 1945 for World War II. And surplus knives continued to be used during the Korean War and the Vietnam War. And I believe the knife was still carried in some fashion in more modern wars such as Iraq and Afghanistan. Now, just a point of curiosity, the Kabar name, the company at the time was going by the name Union Cutlery Company, and there's a long-standing history for the Union Cutlery Company, if you'd like to research that. But the Kabar name apparently comes from, the story is, that an old trapper or hunter years ago sent a letter into the Union Cutlery Company indicating that he had killed a bear with one of their knives. Apparently his gun jammed when he was being mauled by a Kodiak bear, and whatever Union Cutlery Company knife he had, he used that to kill the bear. So somebody at the company thought, oh, that's kind of neat, so they came up with Kabar, or kill a bar. Anyways, that's how the story goes. And officially in 1952, I believe, the Union Cutlery Company changed their name officially to Kabar, just because this knife became so popular and was so recognizable by the Kabar. So they changed their name to Kabar just because the knife was so popular. Now, the surplus knives from World War II continued to be issued throughout the Korean War and the Vietnam War. They didn't come into production again until 1975. And those knives were produced at the Cutco Company factory in Orleans, New York. Specifications, you're looking at a knife that is 0.7 pounds, which surprised me. I thought it would be a heavier knife. Looking at it, I mean, you've got a big steel pommel on the end, a lengthy blade, thick leather stacked handle. I mean, I thought it'd be a heavier knife, but it's fairly light and reasonably well balanced. Like, it doesn't feel in your hand, it doesn't feel as long as it is. You don't feel that forward weight. I mean, that pommel's going to do that for you. So it's a fairly light knife, all things considered. Now, it's a fixed blade knife, obviously. Now, it is a full tang, but it is a rat tail tang. If you look here at the pommel, you can see where the end of the tang protrudes, and then it's pinned right here. And if we look here, you can see right there, you can see the gapping here and the gapping here that shows you the thickness of the tang. So it's a little bit thicker than it actually is at the end. And they taper that down at the very tip just to put the pommel on. But it is a full tang, but rat tail tang knife. Blade length is 7 inches overall. The overall length is 11.875 inches. The edge grind, which is neat, you don't see this with a lot of knives, but they actually specify that it's a 20-degree angle on the edge grind. It is a clip point, and on the military issue knives, this clip from here to here is actually sharpened. Now, it's narrow enough, you can see there, that if you wanted to and have it be within the military specs, I guess, you could sharpen that if you wanted to. But for the civilian version, they do not sharpen that edge. The blade steel is 1095 Cro-Van steel. It is a flat grind. You have a stacked leather handle, and in production, once they have sanded and shaped the handle down, they actually wax it. Put a nice wax coating on it. And that penetrates the leather, and that will help keep the leather from dehydrating and protect it from moisture. The hardness on the blade is 56 to 58 on the Rockwell scale. The butt cap is made of 12-gauge commercial grade carbon steel. It is manufactured in the United States, and the sheath is manufactured in Mexico. It's kind of like buck. They make their knife in the U.S., but they get their leather from south of the U.S. border. The blade thickness is 0.165 inches, and the blade width is 1.188 inches. The model number is the KA1217 and manufactured by Kabar. Now, this is a purpose-built knife, and it's in the name. It's the fighting and utility knife. So, primarily, this was a knife designed for fighting, but also one that the soldier carrying it could use it for a variety of other purposes. So, it's a combat knife. That's why on the military issued ones, it would be sharpened here on the swedge. And, well, it's made for, shall we say, human to human interaction. Okay. So, it's got a fairly long blade at 7 inches, longer than a typical fixed blade knife somebody might carry. And that would have multiple purposes. Number one, a long blade like that has an intimidation factor.
That's a knife.
Sorry, I couldn't help myself. I had to sneak that in there. But that is the truth of it. If somebody presents to you a little pen knife, that's going to be far less intimidating than if somebody presents to you a sword. Well, this is kind of the in-between. So that blade is going to have an intimidation factor. And also a longer blade increases reach. So the more distance you can keep from the other person in that human-to-human interaction, the better for you. So if person A has a 2-inch blade and person B has a 7-inch blade, advantage goes to person B. And also, how shall we say, when knife meets surface and passes through surface, a longer blade goes farther, and a longer blade armor and clothing and layers is less of an issue for a longer blade. So, primarily a fighting knife. Now, it was made to have certain utilitarian aspects too, and that's going to come into applications like setting up a shelter, cutting rope, cutting straps, things like that, repairing gear, clearing brush, food preparation. There's a lot of things outside of combat that a soldier, a lot of tasks they would have to perform, a lot of survival things they would have to perform that wouldn't involve engaging the enemy. So it had to be a knife that was not only good for combat, but also good for just all the other things in the field you would have to do outside of combat. So when I was researching this knife, I read a lot of things. I saw a lot of videos. And there was one comment I read that was from a gentleman who had served in Vietnam in the late 60s. And he was a crew chief on a helicopter. And he recounted the story of how the helicopter had crashed and they went back to retrieve it. It had crashed in a river. And he said, because we didn't have a lot of spare parts at the time. So if a helicopter crashed or was decommissioned, you had to go try and retrieve some parts. So they went out into the field to try and retrieve some parts from this helicopter. And he lost his footing, fell into the river under the helicopter, and got tangled up in a rope. And one of his arms had gotten trapped under the landing gear on the helicopter. So he only had one free arm. And he said, if I didn't have my Kabar, I would have drowned because I was able to, with the one arm, draw the Kabar, cut the rope, then able to free my other hand and get myself out of the water. He said, otherwise I would have drowned. And he said at the end of the comment, he still has that knife. And he said, and I will be buried with that knife because that knife saved my life. That's a pretty good testament to the knife. So now, a lot of the videos I watched on this knife with practical testing treated it like a bushcraft knife. This is not a bushcraft knife. As I said, this is a purpose-built knife. It's built for combat, but also to serve certain utilitarian applications. Could you perform certain bushcraft skills with this knife? Yes. Would it perform them as well as a dedicated, purpose-built bushcraft knife? I don't think so. Just the geometry of the blade, and you've got this big swedge at the top. If you're dealing with the military issue, this is a sharpened swedge. So if you try batoning out towards the tip here, you're going to destroy your baton. And if it's the military issue, you're going to ruin your edge. You've got your fuller here, which curiously, I watched some production videos on this knife. The fuller is not ground in, it's stamped in at the same time they stamp in the Tang stamps. So I thought that was interesting. But like a good bushcraft knife is going to have a full flat grind. It's going to have a Scandi grind, something like that. It's not going to have all the geometric features that this blade has. And plus, this is a rat tail Tang. So that will be an area of weakness or potential failure if you're doing any hard bushcraft use. I mean, if you're doing a lot of heavy chopping with it, if you're doing a lot of heavy batoning with it, there is the potential that it could bend or break at that point. But that's less of a concern with a combat knife or a knife you're just going to use to cut some straps with, cut some rope, cut some bamboo, prep some food, things like that. So it's not a knife that's meant to be pounded on like a bushcraft knife is. Also, it's a very long blade. It's 7 inches. And it's a long blade that isn't a high blade. You'll notice with a lot of your longer bushcraft knives, they'd be much deeper if they were this long. And with the rat tail Tang, how to explain this? The longer the blade is, the more weight it has to bear at this transition. With a full Tang knife, where the tang is the same depth as the blade, it's going to bear that more easily. Imagine if this was a 10-foot long blade, just the weight of it, the blade itself would probably snap at that transition. So combat wise, that's fine. Light utilitarian tasks, that's fine. But for heavy pounding, you just don't want to do that with this knife if you can get away with it. If you were, let's say we think of a bug out bag. If your bug out bag and its contents were solely for the purpose of maybe you have to survive for a few nights in the woods, then, take a bushcraft knife. If your bug out bag is in the middle of the zombie apocalypse or whatever, and you need a knife that will perform certain camp tasks, but also you might have to fight off some zombies, this would probably be a better choice than a bushcraft knife if you had to take just one knife. So really, it's about what the knife is designed to do. This knife is designed to do multiple things, where a bushcraft knife is very specific to what it's designed to do. Could you do a lot of this stuff with this knife? Yes. Will it do it as well? Probably not. Is there a greater potential for failure? Yes. But the knife isn't designed for that. Let's have a look at the sheath. Sheath, as I said, was made in Mexico. It's a leather sheath, has that nice leather smell to it. You've got a very wide belt loop. And that's good because, particularly for a military application, you might have a 1-inch or 2-inch belt to hang this on. You might have a huge web belt to hang this on. So you need a large belt loop. With a smaller belt, say you're going to carry it in the woods just on a regular 2-inch belt, one advantage it has is it acts almost like a dangler, in that with all that extra space in there, it can actually move a little bit on your belt. So if you need to sit down or crouch or something like that, the sheath will move a little bit with your body. And I actually put this on and sat down in a chair, and it actually moved out of the way. Rather, if I only had this much space in the loop and it can't give very much, when I sit down, it can only go upwards. But where it has this much space, when I sit down, it actually moves out of the way a little bit. But when you walk, it's not swinging like a true dangler would. So kind of the best of both worlds. In my opinion, the leather could be a little thicker, but everything is put together nice. Very good stitching. You've got the rivets for extra security. It's got a nice little hole here should you want to put a leg lanyard on it. And that's just simply something that, as it hangs low, you can tie it around your leg just to keep it secure to your side. But very nice stamping. Your Kabar, your U.S. Marine Corps emblem, and then your UMC down here. Everything's nice and securely glued together. So I got a good sheath. Now the knife right now, very snug in the sheath. Fits in there very well. Just the sheath needs to be broken in and stretched out. And you have your loop at the top, snap and loop. And I like that they pass it to pass through. So it's not stitched on, it's pass through and then riveted. That's going to contribute to the longevity. If it was just riveted on or just stitched on, then that stitching can come undone, that rivet can fail. But here you've got both the leather and the rivet. So that's going to last much longer, in my opinion. So a nice sheath. Just needs to stretch out a little bit. But everything fits nice and secure right now. No wiggle, no wobble. And sits nice to the side. So it'll hang nice and flush to your side. Now, one thing I'm going to do with this is I'm going to treat the sheath And I may not need to treat the leather, stack leather right now with the wax coating, but I may put some mink oil or some beeswax on it just to see. In fact, I might go do that now and then come back and give you a look. Okay, so I went ahead, I treated the sheath with some mink oil. It's very important that you get that, particularly along your stitching and all along your edges. And make sure you sneak it in on the backside too. It's a rougher, coarser, unfinished leather, and it will absorb the oil much better. So treat everything really all over. If you can warm the sheath up, put it near a heater or something like that, or out in the sun, it'll absorb the mink oil or whatever you use much better. And went ahead and put a little on the handle. And then I put an extra coating of beeswax on it. And it took that up pretty good. It was already, I think, with the treatment they had put on it, was good, but why not add an extra layer of protection? So, for one last thing, because everybody, I think, loves to see it, and it's important to know, is it sharp out of the box? I'd say it's pretty sharp out of the box. So final thoughts. I think it's a great, well-made knife. I love the stacked leather handles and the way they did it with the spacings. Gives it a very good aesthetic, and that helps with your grip and your traction a little bit. Get that nice little bit of contouring in here. It's a good grip. I've got medium-sized hands, so if you've got big hands, there's plenty of real estate there. And the guard is, for a combat knife, the guard is good, because that's going to, for any thrusting motions, that's going to keep your hand from sliding up on the blade. And the pommel will help keep your hand from slipping off the end of the blade. Works good in various grips. The top of the guard maybe could be a little bit of an issue right here, but not so much that, I've seen some people take that off. I wouldn't do that myself, but got a lot of good grip options. So I like the handle. For its purpose, I like the design of the blade. I think it's got a very good aesthetic look and a very good functional look. Were I entering into the zombie apocalypse, I might sharpen that edge, but I don't think we're expecting any zombies anytime soon, so I'm just going to leave it like that. For me, it's more of a collector piece. It's, like I say, it's a purpose-built knife, and just in daily life, you typically are not going to have that purpose for it. But it's still a good all-around work knife as well. As I said, it's not what I would consider a dedicated bushcraft knife. If my only purpose was to go out in the woods and do some bushcrafting, I've got options I would choose before this, but I still think it has the capability to perform many tasks. Just an all-around, general, well-designed knife. I mean, it has to be. It's lasted since the 40s. So I like it. Just as a person who appreciates a good knife, I just really like everything about it. Yeah, I'm pleased to have it. Great one for the collection. And as I said in the beginning, just an iconic piece of cutlery, an iconic American knife. So, well, I think, folks, we will leave it there. I hope you enjoyed this look at the U.S. Marine Corps Kabar fighting and utility knife. And if you did, please consider tapping that like, maybe subscribe if you'd like to see more. And as I always say at the end of the video, if life's getting you down, you've had a rough day, go spend some time in the woods. It's a peaceful place that will relax you. Just develop an appreciation for nature. It's just a great place to be. If you do go, take a knife with you. Might come in handy, especially Kabar, just in case you run into that big bad bear. You all take care.